conflict of interest declarations. Are there any conflict of interest declarations? There being none. Confirmation of September 1 minutes. They've all been circulated. Pennywise read them very thoroughly as usual. You'd like to move them?
Yes, I will.
Will, seconded?
Happy to second that.
All right. Put that. All those in favour would say aye.
Aye.
Go to no. Follow-ups on the previous RPC meeting. Item 3. Got 3 items there. Does anybody like to raise anything out of them? Being none. For minor items not on the agenda. No minor items. We then move on to the Kotahi plan. We've had a good discussion of that in the workshop. Would someone care to move that we receive the report? Tanya, Mike, any discussion? All those in favour say aye. Contrary, no. Carried. Now we then move on to the next item of the agenda. Scrolling down, I'm going too fast here. Policy projects update. Who's leading this, James?
Excuse me, Chair, sorry, but we've missed the item to confirm the appointment of the co-chairs. Tangata Whenua.
Where's that on here? It's not on the list, is it?
No.
Sorry?
It's on the agenda. It's on the agenda. I'm not sure.
Number 6.
Oh.
Is there not a paper?
Item 6.
Run sheet?
Ah, right.
It's Liz and Uppy.
Yeah, Liz.
Well, I just want to say on the running sheet you've got me, I can't see it there.
It's not on there.
So item 6. Okay, Regional Planning Committee, Tangata Whenua co-chair. Who's leading this?
Well, I'm not sure if it needs to be moved, and I hadn't planned to speak to it, but I will. So the Tangata Whenua reps met several weeks ago and confirmed that Liz Munro is our elected co-chair and Apiata Tapini is our deputy co-chair.
So we just note that.
I think it's just for noting.
Just noted, yeah.
Just
It's not a
note,
decision
right?
of the
You got
committee.
that noted, Leanne? Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Just to say the run sheet I've got doesn't have that on here.
No.
The agenda does. It's not on the list we go through, so let's move on. We've then done the on here. Done Kotahi. Oh, come on. And next one is what was the Policy project update? Yes. Who's doing this?
Ready, Katrina
Sorry.
or Anne? It would be Kerry, but Kerry's unwell today.
Yeah.
So well, with regards to Tank, we had the last day of the hearing on the 27th of September, which was mostly about water quantity matters, and now we're in the Commissioner's hands. There's no further update on that. We're just waiting to hear from them and to get a decision from them. With regards to outstanding water bodies, there is a day for mediation next week. Wednesday next week, that's the first day of mediation on the appeals, and I think that day will just be more about outlining how the mediation is going to work between now and the appeal date. And I think that's really all the updates we have today.
Okay. Any questions on the updates? Any questions from the wall? Anybody on the wall there? Liz? Martin? No. No? Okay. All right, will someone move that the Regional Planning Committee receives and notes the October 21 Policy Projects Update Staff Report? Will?
Happy to move it.
Alana?
Yep.
All right. All those in favour will say aye.
Aye.
Carried. Move on to the next item on the agenda, which is Statutory Advocacy Update. Who's leading this?
Both of us.
There you go.
We have made comments, just trying to find the paper.
Send comments in red.
Why have I not got it? Here we go.
The MFE have received, as you can see, quite a number of submissions on the draft RMA bill. We have made submissions to that, and both the Natural and Built Environment Acts and the Strategic Planning Act still due to be introduced to Parliament in 2022. Excuse me. Where thereafter there'll be an opportunity to make further submissions and presentations through the select committee process. They're still aiming for those bills to be passed with this parliamentary term, but as you can imagine, with 3,000 submissions, they've had a lot to consider. I understand that work is quite the beast.
Just ask the RPC members, are you up to date on what the new Resource Management Planning Act legislation is to look like, and the Natural and Built Environments Act?
A little bit. Yeah, we've discussed it at
I've
our
read
last
it.
RPC hui.
Would you like?
RPC, Tangata Whenua hui.
Would you like an update on that?
Yeah.
Chair, the local government steering group on the reforms that I sit on met last week with officials to discuss the engagement plan with communities, and the intention is a national roadshow before the end of the year, coming out to councils and also to tangata whenua for targeted engagement around the totality of the reforms, given that there's still a lot of uncertainty about the content of the reforms. It would probably be prudent to wait for that opportunity and get briefed by officials rather than council staff trying to divine.
Happy with that? The point I just want to say is there's all the stuff going on.
Yes.
It's of importance to this committee. I just thought people should be briefed on it, and given that we can all be briefed together, so can I just make a note that when the DIA officials are heading this way, we invite them to come and speak to the RPC, and I'll invite the Māori committee along as well. So we understand. I think people need to have in their head what this framework's about and the direction.
Yeah.
Okay.
In terms of the draft National Policy Statement for Indigenous Biodiversity, we're anticipating an exposure draft in late 2021. The team will aim to have input and a submission to that and bring that hopefully before the RPC when that lands, but it's just a wait and see at this point in time.
I'm just intrigued by the way language moves. So back in the dark ages when pterodactyls flew over the sky, we would have had a draft. Today with millennials, we have an exposure draft. What's the difference?
It's not a full draft. Generally, it is
Still a draft.
a skinny draft, generally. And that's what the exposure draft of the new Planning Act was as well. It wasn't a full draft of what the Act would be.
Did we have white papers, green papers, blue papers as well? Oh, right. Give me.
Bones.
It's the bones, correct.
That's a draft.
Straw man.
No, that's something different. Okay.
So, and we made submissions to Napier City Council's draft plan and spatial picture, and working quite closely with them, as you well know, on what a regional spatial strategy might look like to support in that space. That's it, I think.
Could you just describe for us what you see the situation is with the Napier City Council spatial plan? I know that we, as councils, had some concerns about their draft, so could you update us on where you've got to on that?
Well, there's been no further update from that point in time. We're waiting for Napier City Council to work through the submissions and release a discussion document on those.
So what I would like to know, we did attend there, we did,
There hasn't been hearings, and they're not holding hearings, so they're just receiving written submissions.
but we just have to write them a letter.
Yes, although we could seek an audience with that council, I'm sure, if there was a desire to have face-to-face discussions.
Do we feel strongly about this?
I think we do. It's probably at the next stage when they start formulating, once we've seen the submissions and we're getting a sense of where they're going, would probably be the time to engage.
Well, I'd like to leave it with you here that on this, I think this is a really important issue, and I think we should go beyond the normal submission process, in my view. I think we need to be, our voice needs to be heard very clearly.
So can I ask a dumb question? Can you just give us a 2-line overview of what it actually covers, the spatial plan? That was the hui that was on Friday last week as well, wasn't it?
No, slightly different.
Slightly
So
different.
the hui that was on Friday with Hastings District Council
Oh, right.
is about the new Strategic Planning Act and the requirements to have regional spatial plans, and this region's proposal to put forward to central government an application to be considered as, or a proposal to be considered as a pilot region for a regional spatial strategy. And sort of discussing what a spatial strategy looks like was the purpose of that hui on Friday. In terms of Napier City Council's spatial picture, it really is about where they expect to be able to increase density and be able to increase height, new areas for residential growth that ultimately at some point will need to be incorporated into their draft district plan.
And our concerns about that is that in some places it looks like it's in the areas where we believe is very prone to tsunami, inundation, and secondly prone to liquefaction. And we have concerns about both of those issues.
Yeah.
We have been, in my view, relatively muted about these concerns in the past, and I just think it's now time, and councils think it's time to be much clearer about this. We know the threats, we know the consequences of it, and we need to be very clear about it, not take it lightly.
So in terms of the hui on Friday, while it was led by Hastings District Council, the 5 councils are all working together in the region for an intended proposal to central government.
I've got Whenua, then Martin.
Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Katrina.
Katrina, just a bit more on us being a pilot region and what that might mean for the Kotahi plan that we're urgently working on.
Yeah, that's right. In short, essentially, if we were a pilot region, there are advantages in that we are developing our Kotahi plan and how we might incorporate that. It would be good timing, but it also creates a huge amount of extra work that we wouldn't be anticipating between now and 2024. An additional advantage for us is that it comes with a huge amount of resource, particularly for Tangata Whenua to be involved and engaged in the planning process. And so we see that as a good opportunity really to lead out for this region rather than developing our own just regional plans, to be much more comprehensive in our planning regimes.
Just on that, secondarily. Are Tangata Whenua around the table aware of this pilot and the positives that may come out of it?
So we briefed this committee previously on the possibility, and we've circulated the document which summarises what this looks like about a week ago, 10 days ago, sorry, a week ago. And then the purpose of the hui that Hastings pulled together was to ensure that tangata whenua across the region were briefed on the concept. We've got a long way to go before there's anything agreed here, but unfortunately it clashed with our day on Friday for a variety of reasons. We ended up in that position, but there's absolutely no ambiguity about the fact that the Hawke's Bay Regional Planning Committee has the statutory responsibility for the preparation of RMA plans at the moment at the regional level, and will need to be 100% on board with a regional spatial planning exercise if we are to do one. I think look, there are the practical advantages that Katrina's referred to, including some fast tracking that is envisaged in the new legislation, but there's also the inherent benefit of the region planning in an integrated way. We know that Napier and Hastings have not planned in an aligned and integrated way historically. We know that we have a huge amount of development down into Central Hawke's Bay, which has kind of increasingly become interdependent on the Hastings district, economically, socially, etc. And then we've got a huge range of natural hazard issues that are pressing and urgent and need to be dealt with at regional scale. So in theory, it's a great idea to do. The bit that leaves some trepidation is that this has never actually been done. So the closest to this anywhere in the country is the Auckland Unitary Plan. But the Auckland Unitary Plan didn't have to define biophysical limits for fresh water, air, coastal environment, biodiversity, a whole bunch of things which are now envisaged in the new Natural and Built Environment Act. So this would be a planning exercise that would seek to set limits across all of our biophysical characteristics, define where all of our spatial distribution of development is going to go across the region, where all of our infrastructure is going to go over quite a long term. It is a massive undertaking. So there are some risks to Kotahi of us getting into that process. The counter risk, if we don't, is that if the reforms proceed as intended, we'll complete Kotahi and then we'll have to integrate it into a whole new combined regional plan and regional spatial strategy anyway. So this is the very ambitious program the government presently has laid out as its intention, but it's going to be doing it that's going to be the hard part, not just saying it.
On that, I've said to James personally, I think even if the government doesn't agree with us being the pilot, we should do it regardless of the cost. And I agree. My view is it's a little bit like Kennedy would go to the moon, not because it's easy, but because it's hard. And I think this is something that's really hard, but the benefits to us in the long term for this region will be phenomenal. We've got multiple councils making multiple decisions in their own interests for their own purposes, which don't integrate and make sense for the region. We've got Hastings continue to expand because it needs to pressure on population, building on fabulous soils. We've got Napier looking to expand and build on areas which are liable to inundation and so on. If we had a view about this across the whole of the region, we would not be doing this. We'd be going other places. So why don't we do this in a much more sensible way? It's just nuts the way we do this. So I'm really strong on doing this, regardless of whether we get the money or not.
So I guess with that, if I may make a comment then, is it comes back to how do we do that? What I've been hearing is we don't have the resources to do what we already have to do. And actually, even if we had the money, can you find the staff to do this, James? So I hear that, but I'm not hearing how we can do this, actually.
So we'd be assembling the planning teams of the 5 councils into one large virtual team to undertake it. So we'd be calling on everybody's resources. We'd be using the existing planning instruments that are already either operative, such as Tank and Tuki in our case, or the Hastings District Plan. We've got a draft from Napier. We've got a notified district plan from Central Hawke's Bay. So we've got existing instruments that would need to be woven together. It's a big, complex exercise, but ultimately, the region needs to bring coherency to these issues at some point. But these are big choices for this table. And while I agree with the chair, in principle it's the right thing to do, if we don't get the resources from central government, I think we do need to stop and have a good sober look at the doability of it in the absence of those resources.
Martin?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Look, I did have a different question, but I've now got another question as a result of just to note that the reference in your answer earlier, James, to a summary, we were told in the follow-ups at the beginning of the meeting agenda that we were emailed on 8 October, or were going to be a summary of the discussions regarding the spatial planning. I've just looked back through my emails and I can't find that. I would be grateful perhaps if that has gone, or if it could be sent out again, if it could be checked if it's gone or sent out again. That's the summary of discussions referred to in the follow-ups. But I just wanted to pick up on the difference, I guess, between spatial planning and Kotahi. As I see it, Kotahi is really dealing with externalities, in other words, the effects of what people do. And I guess the environmental outcomes that we want for the way people do things to change. But spatial planning is much bigger than that. And I'm just looking at a list of what a spatial plan should include under the Randerson report. And it includes, I guess, an interface with planning long-term objectives to improve the quality of the natural and built environments, but it also includes future transport corridors, future and existing infrastructure such as ports, airports, wastewater treatment, additional capacity to accommodate growth, locations for new social infrastructure, timing of infrastructure, new recreational community facilities, where the significant natural areas are, significant ecological areas, landscapes, heritage value, etc. So, you know, you're actually starting, my vision for a spatial plan is to design the blueprint for a net zero carbon region, thinking about how many people are going to live in the region, where they're going to live, where they're going to go to work, how they're going to go to work, what infrastructure is required. You know, it's that linkage between infrastructure and activities that you don't currently have under the RMA. You don't have a direct link between your long-term plans and your RMA plans. And that's the gap, the void that the Spatial Planning Initiative will deliver. So I think it's hugely important. It actually starts with a regional question: what is the region we want to be, and where and how do we do that? So I just wanted to touch on that. So yeah, the question was, can you please recirculate the email? But my actual question was, there's reference in the statutory advocacy to the Water Services Bill having been passed. Could we perhaps get an update at the next RPC on, given we no longer have a joint water governance group, implications for us as a planning authority or consenting authority or as a regional council or whatever it might be, of the Water Services Bill as now enacted? Thank you.
Yep, we can do that. All right, any other questions? Good round of house on that. Good discussion. Right, would someone care to move that we receive the report?
Have you moved, Chair?
Anyway, thank you. Tanya, all those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Contrary note carried.
A procedural motion, Chair. Could we just confirm that we accepted and passed item 7? We talked about it in our workshop, the work program.
Item 7.
Because I did have some questions from that item.
Oh, we did. We have done that?
We have done it.
Yep. Would you like to circle back to it?
Yes, please.
Sure.
Yes, please, because I'm not sure we had the opportunity to question.
No, we didn't. I just said we because we had a long discussion in the workshop,
Yep.
I asked for a move, seconder,
Yep.
put the motion, moved on.
I think the point, though, in the meeting is that it's publicly available for those to hear, and the items are part of the agenda. So, yes, we had it in workshop, which was private, but we're now in public.
But we have received the report in public. We've moved and seconded it. It's now public.
I'd like to be able to question parts of it.
You can question parts of it, yes, I'm happy for you to do that.
With regards to point number 12, it talks about the highly productive soils and Indigenous biodiversity and all the different instruments coming at us that may affect our Kotahi work plan. I just want to ask the staff if it's worthy, and now we've just talked about the regional spatial plan, whether it's worthy that within your timelines and diagrams that we could also have an additional layer of what is coming at us from central government and how that may affect our decision making along the way. I think that's very useful. Yep, thank you.
Good point.
I had some questions too. Very quick.
Yep, Tanya.
In the list of workshops that we might have, could we add in there a workshop on the Regional Coastal Environment Plan? Because that was something that got approved by the Minister not long after the RPC was established. And in all honesty, I can't remember what's in there. It's been a long time since we've looked at it. it would be helpful to know what it actually covers.
Yeah, I'd like just to add that I suspect there'll be a lot more workshops that we'll want to add to that list. What the paper sets out is that there's very few decisions, that the RPC needs to make formally, and so what we'd like to do, once you have your governance discussion and your arrangements set up, we should be discussing then with the governance team about what workshops are needed and what meetings we can turn into workshops with the Māori committee.
Right. And I think just on the workshop, kaupapa, there was I think a draft sort of list of workshops and dates. And I noted that the Mātauranga Māori one was not set down till later next year. But actually, given we're doing vision and values, etc., it should come before that.
Yeah.
That's fine. That's all.
Yeah, that, to be honest, that timing might have been driven by the timeline around our recruitment of a Mātauranga specialist, which was funded in the long-term plan, to get that person up and running and able to pull together some content for that. But look, take the point that we might just need to get on and do that sooner.
But the timing and sequence of these things, I would have thought, was something that we as governors need to be clear about and set with our own paces for the obvious reasons that you've outlined. This is sort of like what would we have before what was it? Something like a draft?
Exposure draft.
Exposure draft. I think this is
internal.
this is before an exposure draft. Pre-exposure draft.
Right.
Taking your clothes off draft.
Yeah.
Is it?
Okay. All right. I'm getting close to the end of the meeting now, team.
Having a shower.
We're hanging perilously on the edge. We've got the last item on the agenda is the minor items. We've put down as minor items, but I'll take one last call. We've got a minor item I'd like to raise. No? I want to thank you all for your time, your attendance and your contributions. It's been very worthwhile. Close the meeting. Would you like to close the meeting for us?
Kia ora tātou, Karakia whakamutinga mō tēnei hui. Te tamu ere tāpua ni pono whakapainga ngā haere o mātou tēnei hui. O mai te whike ora me te marama tangata mai ngā noi tautoko ai ni hakanei ai.
Aye. Meeting closed. Yeah, I just want to ask the